Well, Uncle Dan,
Yeah.
you know what makes me crazy?
Everything?
People who wear a tiny hat. Either no hat or all hats.
You hate Bolivians?
I hate Bolivians. They're tiny little hats. I hate clowns. Let's see. I hate children.
Look, if you're not wearing my hat,
Yeah.
then you are other than me, and I hate you just for whatever headwear.
Yeah. I hate people who wear hats demonstratively.
Yeah.
There you
Let's
go.
move on.
Moving on.
Doug, you have something
Uncle
to say.
Doug, how do you feel about headwear in general?
Well, let's talk about some specific headwear.
Levi the Weasel in the studio is
right.
wearing a little Pope's hat right
a little
now.
Pope's hat.
Yes, indeed.
So, as I'm sure most of our listeners are aware, there's a story in the news right now about an American jihadi who went to ISIS in Syria.
American Jihad. I thought you were talking about Steve King
That's right, Steve King. Exactly.
or Marco Rubio.
Oh, I would pay for his ticket to Syria. So there's one, Hoda Muthana is her name, and she was an American-born, and we'll talk about her citizenship status in a minute, but a Muslim, born into a very Muslim family. Her father was a Yemeni ambassador to this country. Or not exactly an ambassador, but worked in the embassy anyway. So she was raised in a very strict Muslim household, and if you've seen the stories, she's in Syria right now in a refugee camp. She's asking to return to America with her young child, but she, back in 2014, she walked away from America, very literally, flew to Syria, and burned her passport, and kind of became a American mouthpiece for the Syrian ISIS. So anyway, her story is kind of interesting, and it'll lead us into this larger point that I want to talk about. But she was raised in a very conservative Muslim household. She had to wear her headdress all the time. She had to dress like a Muslim. She couldn't have really much interaction with other people that were outside of the faith. She was homeschooled until college.
But born in the States, lived in the States.
Born in the States, yep. And she speaks with when you hear, it's very kind of off-putting because when you hear what she said about jihad in this American accent, it's very off-putting.
Right.
Anyway, she had only one outlet as a young woman, and that was her religion. So she fell very deep into her religion, and she wasn't allowed to have a smartphone until she graduated high school. And when she did, unsurprisingly, she was perfectly primed to be radicalized. So she was very heavily recruited by ISIS. This is unknown to her parents, obviously, at the time. And when she was at the University of Alabama, she told her parents she was going on a field trip. She took out her tuition money that was left, used that to buy a ticket to Syria, and went to join ISIS.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
Great study abroad you got there.
Yeah, exactly. So when she got there, things went off the rails pretty much immediately. Even though she was kind of a commodity, an American woman who was an ISIS member, she was still a woman.
She was a woman.
That's right.
Did she not notice that before she went?
She hadn't quite figured that part out
She
yet.
should have paid attention
Right.
to that bit.
That's right. So she was immediately forced to marry a jihadi who died 3 months later. She married another jihadi, again, against her will. This guy would be end up being the father of her child. He died in battle. She married a third time.
Jesus.
This guy is missing in action. They don't know where he is as ISIS collapsed. So
Right.
now, I don't want to make this sound like she's a totally innocent bystander in this narrative. Her Twitter feed became very, very a very important recruitment tool for ISIS in the West.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
She has. You among many other tweets. Here's one that she tweeted. Go on drive-bys and spill all their blood, or rent a big truck and drive all over them. Veterans, Patriot, Memorial, etc. Day parades. Go on drive-bys, spill all of their blood, or rent a big truck and drive all over them. Kill them.
Great.
Hard to find a lot of nuance there.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But, poetry is what it is.
Now, she claims after a period of time she became very disillusioned, but that didn't mean she could step away from her role. Again, she was a woman in Syria.
Yeah, she was kind of trapped.
Yeah, she was very trapped.
And she'd burned her passport.
She burned her passport, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've given up your citizenship.
No, it just means you need to get a fucking passport before you can travel.
That's right.
It means you've got a very awkward trip into the U.S. consulate.
Well, yeah,
Damascus.
exactly. So as ISIS collapsed, she found herself on the run, literally. She and her 18-month-old son ended up spending time in the desert hiding. She ate grass until she was captured by the Kurds, and she's now in a refugee camp in Syria where the Kurds are not too keen on members of ISIS, as you might imagine.
Weird. Why not?
Her story, so she's trying to come back to this country. her citizenship is actually in question because she was born on American soil, but her father, as a diplomat, didn't had a diplomatic immunity, and therefore, with that immunity, your kid, even though born here, is not a citizen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
but so what happened was the Yemeni government collapsed in civil war in the mid-1990s, and specifically when it collapsed and when he lost his job and therefore his immunity matters a great deal.
Sure.
So he claims that the government collapsed, he lost his immunity, and then she was born, making her a citizen.
Right.
Well, it depends on, a collapsing government doesn't necessarily have time to take HR
This all
calls.
depends on how you figure the date of Easter, I think.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
It's a lunar cycle.
the government's claiming that that the Yemeni government still existed. He had his immunity when she was born, therefore she's not a citizen. And because we're living in the worst timeline, Secretary Mike Pompeo has already singled her out by name to say that she's not a citizen, and Trump has claimed credit saying he told him to say that. So
Great.
yeah, good stuff.
Good
Now,
stuff.
This is pretty scary stuff, and she was definitely a jihadi. She definitely gave aid and comfort to some of the worst people that have ever walked on the earth.
Yep.
And explicitly encouraged and threatened death,
Yes.
I suppose.
And was decidedly anti-American.
Most definitely. And if she does manage to get back here, she will be in prison for some period of time, no doubt about it. So,
For what crime specifically?
terrorism.
just really, really bitchy.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just
Just being ignorant.
yeah. So she is claiming basically that she was radicalized in place. She was radicalized in America by her community and the direction she took here, and then was recruited by ISIS. And so, because she was forced to wear the hijab and forced to be only a Muslim, her identity was so wrapped up in that.
And homeschooled.
Homeschooled.
And she lived in Alabama?
She lives in Alabama, but there's apparently a large Muslim community, very insular, as you might imagine, in Alabama.
what they don't. There's not a lot of community outreach.
For some reason, there's not a lot of community
Weird.
outreach. I know, it's strange. So what I wanted to talk about today is was there some point in her early life where a little nudge or an encounter might have saved her or pushed her in a different direction? And was it because of what she was forced to wear that didn't happen? And I think the larger conversation I'd like to get into here with you guys is, as atheists, what is our responsibility, or what should we do in regards to people who wear their religion on the outside? And I know that differs from religion to religion and from situation to situation. But Hasidic Jews, devout Muslims, Amish people, Mormon missionaries,
Right.
they put their religion outside of themselves so that you know.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, do we have an obligation, or how should we treat them? I'm really like to get you guys' take on that, how that works.
Well, I mean, is what's her name? Hoda
Muthana.
Is she making claims that? I mean, I don't know if she's making claims, but I have to wonder if part of her experience was growing up in Alabama and being so otherized, by choice or otherwise, that the way Americans treated her, that what affinity did she have with the culture she was with the world she was living in?
Right.
She's claiming that it wasn't a result of bullying, but it was a result of her parents didn't allow necessarily in her life for there to be this outreach or there to be this.
This isn't a bullying. She's not laying it there.
She, as a young woman, she wanted community, she wanted friendship.
Yeah.
And the only place she was allowed to have that was within the religion. So she went deep. I did the same thing.
Yeah, and you were radicalized.
That's right.
At the Missionary Training Center.
That's correct.
Which is true. These guys go to get radicalized at this place.
That's a good way to look at it.
But there have been these spasms of kind of Islamic terrorism that have gone on in past decades, and one of which was kind of a lot of violence in the UK.
Yeah.
And what they found was happening there was not; these were not generally first generation. I mean, there were the famous beheading where those African immigrants beheaded that soldier. It was insane. But it wasn't first generation Muslims that were that were causing these problems. It was the second. It was the native born British subjects, these young men who felt so alienated by society in the UK. And again, They have agency. They're making decisions. They could not go join ISIS. They could not do these things. But they were pushed by an incredibly racist. They were unwelcome in their own.
They felt unwelcome
in their own society.
Yeah.
So they went off to Pakistan and did what they did.
Yeah. But I see women in hijabs all the time in the grocery store, and I mean, traveling around the country, you see people, Hasidic Jews. I don't know if we're, I guess my question is, as atheists, should we try and engage, or should we not, or is it situational?
Engage in what way, though? I mean,
I don't know.
Here's the thing. I have a couple of thoughts about this. My first thought is that that our society works best when we embrace multiculturalism
Right.
as well as we can. When we open ourselves up to everyone being part of our community.
Right.
And I think that actually does solve a lot of the problems of, when you reach out and embrace others, they don't feel as alienated, and then they maybe don't do shitty things because they think that they're alone.
Right.
And this applies to, incels and whatever. Like, the more that we can embrace people and take them as they come, the better off the whole society is. But it's not like, we're not a group that goes around proselytizing.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
like we're going to go around saying, hey, you need to join us. I mean, I just think it's all about but the other thing is that a lot of these groups insulate themselves. They do it on purpose. They don't want us to be able to penetrate that.
And I think that's right. And I also think that the fact of the matter is some of the most damaged and helpless victims of religious oppression are the people that are forced to wear this bullshit.
Yeah.
It's cultural and it's historical, but the hijab for me has always seemed like a symbol of oppression. But if you ask the woman wearing it, she's not going to agree with me, right?
No. But look, there's examples on both sides of this issue where you see these incredibly brave women in Iran, taking their friends, filming them taking their hijabs off publicly in the street. I saw one the other day where this total stranger man is like, okay, I'm going to start hitting you if you don't put your hijab on.
Jesus.
And he starts hitting her, and he's like, I told you I'd hit you.
Right.
But then you have the other side of this, which is France trying to ban, the hijab in school, or banning hijabs in schools. And so, I have a friend from Jordan who talked to a female who's not Muslim, she's a Christian, Jordanian Christian, who says hijabs are never voluntary. It's bullshit.
Right.
Burqas are never voluntary. She's like, fuck that shit.
Right.
But it is, again, it is a religious freedom and a
Well, let me complicate this even a little bit more.
yeah.
I printed off this picture, and this is the picture of the hijab, the kind of the Hope Obama art style.
Yeah, the Shepard
Fairey style
propaganda
and
art.
it's a woman wearing a hijab that's made out of an American flag. Now everyone's seen this.
Yeah, it's a really common image.
Yeah, and it's supposed to now it's this symbol of freedom, and I'm conflicted about that. Because
Well, look, I think that our job isn't to figure out whether they need to stop wearing hijabs.
Right.
Our job isn't to figure out whether these people should or shouldn't be wearing what they're wearing. If they're in these United States, the best thing we can do is enfranchise them,
Yeah.
and enfranchise the individuals and the groups. Because if they feel enfranchised, if they feel a part of the larger society as well as their own insular society, that makes it so much easier for them to engage and maybe think to themselves, okay, well, this isn't working for me.
Right.
There's another thing out there. I know how many things are out there now.
Right.
Maybe I can find a way, something that works for me. We know that there are a lot of atheists who are former Muslims. So I think that the job of the free thinker, of the of Americans and people in free countries the world over is one of enfranchisement, is one of
Right.
acceptance,
Yeah.
and learn from them,
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think
learn and embrace.
that it's the ideas that, for instance, she ran towards, this woman ran towards, is an incredibly toxic ideology.
Right.
Right. And if people aren't given space to explore great ideologies or pluralistic ideologies, then they're going to go in that direction. So,
Or at least there's the danger of that.
there's the danger of that. So, yes, I think it's the idea of the ideas are toxic and bad. Mm-hmm. The people are not.
Right.
Until they fully embrace them and then start blowing people up and doing shit like that. But even those people come back from it.
Yeah.
They can come back from it. So,
And if you have trouble with separating a human being from their ideas, from their toxic beliefs, then probably just don't even think about the beliefs at all, because it's much more important to embrace the human than it is to because the problem is that when someone gets yelled at in the market
Right.
for wearing a hijab or whatever, that is how we prime someone to become our enemy.
Right.
well, and to just turn away from, because why wouldn't they? If you're
Right.
just constantly abused,
Yeah.
trust me, if you were walking down the street and you see a random woman in a hijab, she has gotten so much fucking abuse,
Right.
Yeah.
in this country or in a European country. Don't be part of that vector.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that,
Smile and say hello.
I agree.
yeah, you don't have to make friends with them, but at very least, if you see someone else abusing them, you should step in.
100% agree.
You should be making. We should, as a society, be vocally not okay with someone abusing
Right.
a person just because of their religious garb.
Yeah.
or
And I think it's entirely appropriate to be effusively kind to people in that are wearing the hijab or they're Hasidic Jews.
Yeah.
And I'm not being. I don't think it's fake or false. I think that as atheists, we've found a better way, and we don't go tell them, "Hey, I'm an atheist. You should be like me."
Right.
But they should at least know that not everybody's shitty, and that this is a country that can be accepting, and maybe there's a way out.
If we, not every atheist calls themselves a humanist.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly call myself that, and part of that, we are children of the Enlightenment, and these Western values we all claim to have. You put your money where your fucking mouth is. Like
Right.
if you believe in pluralism, individual freedom to believe and behave in whatever way you want. Put your money where your mouth is,
Right.
and allow them to occupy the same space you do.
The best thing we can do is show them what the happiness of pluralism looks like.
Right.
Rather than like preaching about it in an intellectual way isn't helpful.
Right.
Or I mean, it's helpful, but it's not. It doesn't do the job of
Right. And attacking them and behaving badly towards them is a product. You are acting fearfully.
Right.
Don't be afraid of them.
Right.
Right. That's where those ugly emotions come from, and people screaming at people of color and for having barbecues in the wrong place.
Right.
And yelling at women in hijabs or kids wearing yarmulkes.
Right.
That's an awful, fearful way to behave towards another human being.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say don't do that.
Yeah, and I think because we have rejected religion as a whole, we're not looking at it from a narrow point of view. Like, oh, you're silly, stupid hat. They're all kind of silly.
Right.
Right. And so
everybody's got their silly, even if they're not wearing it.
exactly.
Catholicism is no less stupid just because you can't see it when somebody's walking down
Right.
the street.
But people who do wear their religious garb on the outside are putting that out there, and unintentionally or being forced to. But I think you're absolutely right. I think kindness, acceptance is the only way to be, and not being fearful. I think that's absolutely
Yeah,
right.
I mean, just being decent.
Decent.
You may be the only person who's been decent to them that whole day.
Yeah.
So be that guy.
So I guess what we're saying is, if you see someone wearing a yarmulke or a hijab or whatever, invite them to your pork roast.
Yes, but bring some cheeseburgers to their brisk.
Offer to pay for their bacon. It's the least you can do.
Oh dear God! But yeah, it's just if they feel like their society is a safe space, and those ideas are attractive to them, and if you feel like as an atheist you are evangelical or want to proselytize, play the long game.
Yeah.
Make the world a wonderful safe space for them to be in, and maybe those arcane ideas just become less and less attractive. And I think that that's kind of the goal of society.
And it becomes less attractive to the second generation.
Right.
They can identify as being American or Western or whatever, wherever you are. They can identify with being part of the larger culture rather than what's happening when they feel isolated and therefore go down that path.
Yeah.
So,
Well, fellas, we just solved world peace.
oh, thank God.
It's
Yeah.
it's cured. Everything's right in the world. I think we can safely move on.
Just generally don't be a dick.
Be nice.
Seems to be a theme.
Yeah. Moving on.